Please welcome Elisa Aaltola.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to be talking about moral psychology. That's what I'm researching at the moment. So that means that I'm looking into how different emotions or other psychological events or states affect our moral decision making. And one of those mental states that I've been researching lately is shame, and another one is guilt. And this talk is about shame and guilt, and how they differ from each other and how they impact our moral judgments concerning other animals, and also how they impact animal advocacy. What sorts of things we should take into account when we try and speak on behalf of other animals. So, first, guilt. This paper is based on lots of different psychological research, so I'm using studies. This is just not my own interpretation, but this is based on and very heavily grounded on psychiatry and psychology. So trust me, I think I have some inclination of what they are talking about, and I'm trying to come across that quite well, hopefully. So guilt is a state which is usually seen as something quite negative, something counterproductive. Guilt is spoken of as something that we should try and avoid as much as possible. We should never feel guilty, we should try and be always proud of what we are, we should always just state that this is what we did, never feel bad for it, and all sorts of things like this. And the idea, particularly in the contemporary culture, is very heavily this: we should not be guilty, we should never ever feel guilt. But in fact, guilt is something that's quite productive. We should feel guilty. There are lots of things that we should feel guilty over, and guilt is a very important moral emotion because of this. It pinpoints the things that we have done wrong. It pinpoints things that we should try and better in ourselves. And this is because guilt has various different elements that make it into something quite fruitful. The first one of these elements is that it's other-directed. Guilt concerns others, it doesn't concern ourselves, which might be surprising, because we often think that when we feel guilty, we are very much self-focused, but this is not the case. When we feel guilty, we are other-directed. We concentrated on how our actions impact others. We try and think of what we have done towards others, what harm we have caused, what good consequences our actions have had, and so forth. The other thing about guilt is that it's internal, and this is an important point too. It concerns our own values and our judgments. We try and imagine what our moral landscapes are like. We try and picture what our values are. So when we are in a state of guilt, we go into our own minds, into our internal landscapes, and we explore our own values, our own ethics. We don't think of the outside world so much. Other than that, we of course concentrate on how our actions impact others, but we are not concerned of what others think is the right thing to do. We are concerned over what we ourselves think we ought to do. So we can feel guilt even when nobody else thinks that we have done anything wrong. So if you lie successfully, nobody thinks you've done anything wrong, you still feel guilt if you think that the lie was something that you shouldn't have done. And if you've read Crime and Punishment, it's a perfect example of guilt. In Crime and Punishment, Raskolnikov, the main character, is free because nobody knows that he has committed the murder, but he feels incredible guilt. He's burdened by the guilt. So guilt is internal. It also concerns ethics. It doesn't concern how we appear in the eyes of others, but it concerns how our actions are generating a certain form of ethical system, normative system. So it concerns ethical beliefs. And lastly, it concerns individual actions. So we don't feel guilt over our whole personality or identity. We feel guilt because we have done some single action in a morally wrong way. So it's very heavily focused on single actions, never the whole individual. So these are the four elements that are very important for guilt. Shame, on the other hand, is completely the opposite from guilt. These two are often mixed and confused, but they are almost oppositional mental states. Shame and guilt are extremely different from each other. Whereas guilt is other-directed, shame is self-directed. So we try and think of how our actions make ourselves appear in the eyes of others. We are not concentrated on how the actions impact others. If I lie to somebody, I feel guilt because I know that it might harm the other person. But in a state of shame, we focus on what our identity is in the eyes of others. And this is why shame feels so horrendous sometimes, because we see ourselves from the viewpoint of other people. And we concentrate on ourselves, how we feel, how terrible it is that we are such terrible people and others are laughing at us. And our whole attention is placed on what we as people are like. And this is related to the social status that we have, or the social identity, or our appearance in the eyes of others. It's a very, very self-focused state. And whereas guilt is internal, state is external, and shame is external. We are constantly not evaluating what our values are, or what our morals are, our ethics are, but we are concentrated on how others consider us. We are not going through a moral thought process at all. We are not focused in any way on our ethics, but we are focused on what others think of us, the external world, how others view us, how they position our identities in relation to others. And because of this, whereas in Crime and Punishment, the main character felt guilt even though nobody knew that he had done anything wrong, in a state of shame, we can feel shame regardless of whether we think we have done something wrong or not. Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde is a good example of this. I don't know if people here have read it, but in that book, the person is in a state of shame constantly, the main character, because he knows that he is a terrible person in the eyes of others. And this is something that then leads into this deep and destructive state of shame. And whereas guilt concerns ethics, shame concerns identity. Again, it's not about values or moral judgments, it's about us as people, our identity, our status in front of others. And lastly, it focuses on that whole identity. The whole self feels incredibly faulty and fragile in front of those others who are viewing her in a skeptical light. So it doesn't focus on individual actions, it focuses on the whole self. We as people in general are corrupted when we feel shame. Now, in that literature that I mentioned, in the psychological reviews on shame and guilt, they have found that guilt tends to be very morally productive. This is surprising to many, usually. But it is. We should feel guilt. As I said, it's a very morally loaded emotion. It leads to change in our actions. And this is because we want to correct the action that we think was wrong, morally faulty. We want and do better. We have gone through the processes of internal evaluation. We know why we have done wrong, how we could do better, and therefore we try and change. We do otherwise in the future. Shame, on the other hand, is very morally destructive. It usually leads into a place where the individual feels completely corrupted and devalued, disparaged in the eyes of others. And because we can't change our whole self, we think that we can't do anything. We can always correct individual actions, but we can't replace ourselves, the whole thing that we are. And therefore we decide that we can't do anything. And this can be extremely psychologically damaging. It leads to lots of difficult psychological phenomena like narcissism is grounded on feeling shame. Particularly if you have felt a lot of shame in the childhood, you probably have lots of various psychological problems when you grow into an adult. It's a damaging experience and it leads to lots of difficulties, but also it's morally destructive. Now my question is, because of these differences between guilt and shame, should animal advocacy and animal activism try and raise guilt in people and try and avoid causing shame? Should it be something that deliberately tries to avoid guilt, whilst constantly paying attention to whether shame is involved and trying to avoid shame as as quickly as possible. And how to do this? Now, there are good reasons to think that shame should be avoided. When you are talking about animal issues to people in a way that raises shame in them, 4 things probably happen. And these again are based on psychological research. First, shame leads into denial. In a state of shame, we try and deny the whole thing that causes the shame. So we usually try and devalue those who have criticized us. We try and think that they are not relevant to what we are. We try and somehow take their position away. We try and mock their relevance to us. So somebody might say to an activist, "What do you know anyway?" and deny their importance. They might state that you have no knowledge of these issues, I don't have to listen to you, this is irrelevant. So they deny the whole issue. Another thing is that shame leads into projection. And this is a state that's very common, in my opinion, in animal advocacy. When people who have started to feel shame because of animal issues and because of their dietary habits, for instance, they project that shame onto the advocate, onto the activist, or to whoever is talking to them. And they try and pinpoint some faults in that person. They try and find some kinds of critical points that they might somehow see as reasons for why they don't have to listen to her. The shame that they feel, they furiously project onto the other person. They say that you are the person who is doing something immoral, I'm not the immoral guy here, you are doing something incredibly bad and incredibly destructive. So for instance, they might claim that activists are causing damage to animals in some way or another, that activists are trying to lure people into a planet where we cannot live in a sustainable way because there would be not enough fields for all the animals to roam, and all sorts of ridiculous things. They try and find some kind of a shameful thing for the activists to face. The third element is that shame leads into withdrawal. Those who feel shame try and avoid the people who cause shame. They try and avoid all circumstances where they might face them. They try and avoid all sorts of literature or information that causes shame. And when I was still doing street stalls, information stalls in UK when I was living there, I saw this all the time. People refused to see the literature. They got quite angry and said, "I don't want to see those pictures. Why are you doing this? I don't have to listen to that." And they might even go like this, I don't want to see anything, because they feel shame. It was a very common occurrence. So they withdraw from criticism. They avoid you, they avoid the vegans who might start preaching at them about these issues, and so forth. The fourth thing is aggression, and this is the worst of these all. It leads in, sometimes shame leads into really serious moments of aggression and hostile behavior. People might get absolutely outraged by the fact that somebody is trying to tell them that they are doing something damaging to animals. They might even attack you on the street, they might shout abuse at you, they might try and denigrate in all sorts of ways. They might try and label you as a terrorist and so forth. And again, this is very counterproductive. These things don't lead into change. These people will not change their opinions about other animals. It will not happen. And therefore, it's really tricky to try and evoke moral change by a shame. It leads to attacks on advocates, as I'm listing here, and withdrawal from and denial of the animal issue. It's not something that should be caused in others. It's not a mental state that activists should be causing in the general public. Now, in animal advocacy, guilt, on the other hand, can be quite beneficial. First, if you remember the 4 different elements that I mentioned at the beginning, first, it leads into regard towards the other animals because it's other-directed. So people focus on how their actions impact others, what their actions cause to other animals. The meat eater might suddenly think, oh, this meat comes from somewhere, and I don't want to cause harm to that somebody who it comes from. It's also something that in the animal context too leads into evaluation of animal-related values, because it's internal, remember? So the person undergoing guilt might suddenly try and figure out what her ethics concerning other animals is, what the values are that make her eat meat, and should she perhaps replace those values with other more beneficial ways of relating to other animals. And this again leads into animal ethics thinking, because guilt focuses on ethics. People might actually start to ponder on animal ethics issues. They might try and go through arguments, internally arguments over these things. They might try and debate themselves, or they might try and debate somebody else. They actually want to hear. So sometimes those people who are very critical towards you are actually just in a state of guilt, and they try and understand why they should change. They really want to understand. So don't avoid the debates, just go in there, but in a kind way, that kindness in it. And lastly, also in the animal context, this leads into the wish to change. Because it impacts just the one action, that action is easy to deal with, relatively easy. A person can just stop eating meat or consuming dairy. It's not a holistic change that's required from them. And therefore, a guilty meat eater can be quite easily persuaded if we just follow that guilt. And this sounds horrible. I'm suggesting not to all of you that you should try and make people feel guilty, but it actually does work. It's something really, really productive. They might start to rethink their ethics concerning other animals, and they might want to change their actions. It leads into a desire to change. Now, again, I'm still going through this. Shame, on the other hand, raises social discomfort in the eyes of others. Often, because in a state of shame, we want to feel good about ourselves in general, in the eyes of others, in the perspective of other people. We want to somehow remedy the identity that we have that's causing shame. And in the animal context, I would argue that usually people try and remedy that identity by returning back to the anthropocentric majority culture. So because they feel shame in the eyes of the activist, they go back, they return to the status quo of things, the anthropocentric culture that's surrounding us everywhere. And there they find the relief for their state of shame. They think that these other people, everybody else is like me, so I don't have to change. There's nothing wrong with me. And what's wrong is those other people who try and criticize me. So it reinforces the anthropocentric identity. It gives them a sense of relief, and therefore becomes something really comforting for them. Also, it leads into the wish to find comfort from anthropocentric ethics as such, not just the identity thing, but also ethics. They try and find justification for their ethical beliefs from the majority, because the majority gives them a blessing. Because shame is so external, finding an external reason for one's action is a safety net for those who are feeling shame over animal issues. So they look for reasons, moral justifications from others, and repeat them. And this is then, again, something that reinforces those majority viewpoints on animal issues, the anthropocentric normative systems that most people have. And search for identity, again, in the animal context, can reinforce lots of particular identities revolving around animal consumption. So the person feeling shame because of activists tries and finds not just a general identity from the anthropocentric society, but also particular identities as a sense of relief. And here lots of different alternatives arise straight away. For instance, the masculine meat-eating man is one of those identities that really quickly erases all the shame and gets rid of all the issues. Because shame is so incredibly strongly focused on identity, finding a strong identity that takes that shame away is the best cure. And this is what happens. So the man who is feeling shame over animal consumption might then declare that he is a macho alpha male and he needs to eat meat, and what are you being so weak for, and why are you being so cowardly, and we don't need to be so sensitive, and so forth. These things happen all the time. Or the naturalist hunter might say that I'm a proud, pre-historical person who now just wants to go and kill lots of other animals because this is what I am, this is my identity as a strong human being. And again, these identities are reinforced by a shame. So what the activist is actually doing is making people more strongly rooted into their various anti-animal attitudes. And because shame is related to also the sense of complete inadequacy as a whole self, it doesn't lead into change in the animal context either. What it does is that people probably don't ever want to hear of animal issues again. They try and avoid them as far as possible. They really get antagonistic against them. So in order to feel better, the shameful meat eater tries to reposition herself in the majority values and tries to ignore animal ethics. And I would claim that this happens all the time. And simultaneously, the various defenses that I mentioned are quite prominent in the animal advocacy scene. So first of all, there's lots of denial of pro-animal values. Projection of blame onto activists. So activists are getting lots of labels and stereotypes as crazy terrorists or completely mad and berserk people who just have lost their plot completely and utterly. Or that they are naive and they don't know what they're talking about. They're quite silly and fluffy and hippie and they are hugging bunnies everywhere. So you don't have to listen to them. They are silly people in one way or another. And this is projection of the fault in oneself onto others, those who criticize you. And thirdly, this might lead into withdrawal from those activists, or any signs of animal rights, like I already mentioned. And fourthly, into aggression, into clear displays of hostility and violence. Again, a very common occurrence. So guilt is a beneficial tool in animal advocacy. Shame is counterproductive, extremely counterproductive. Don't raise shame. But how to avoid raising shame? If we often in everyday thinking see these two states as synonymous, how can we separate them? How can we evoke guilt and not evoke shame? Well, this is surprisingly easy to do. According to this shame and guilt psychological literature, shame is based on negative commands. So if you say to somebody, do not do this act, do not eat meat, or do not think of, do not consume, or whatever, this is enough sometimes, and probably quite often, to lead into a state of shame. So negative commands are not a good thing. Preaching in a very, sometimes militant way is not a good thing. I used to do it all the time, getting very antagonistic and preachy and really kind of hostile and angry. It doesn't work. You shouldn't do it. It leads into states of shame. Guilt, on the other hand, is easy to evoke by positive encouragement. So you say, do this instead. So you say, oh, you could be vegan, you could do this. You don't say, don't eat meat. Instead of that, you state, you might as well try and be vegan, and say it in a positive, encouraging way, not in a judgmental, negative sense, but in a very kind of persuasive way. And this then leads into guilt, because it's a more comfortable place to be. So if somebody just says to you something positive, says to you, oh, you could, if I now said to you, oh, you could think of the environment, you might probably feel a bit guilty about whether you think of the environment enough. Do you own a car or whatever? You wouldn't feel shame. Whereas if I said to you, you all should, stop doing this and that straight away, you would probably feel shame and then resent me as a result. So guilt is something quite comfortable because of the positive encouragements that lead into it. It's not a very negative thing. So, sorry? Oh, sorry. Yeah. So via positive encouragement, guilt is easy to avoid. So animal rights and veganism should be presented as something enabling and something that also supports the flourishing of the individuals in question, and not as something negative, not as something that's a demand and something that's away from them, not as a sacrifice, not as a prohibition, but rather as an enabling, positive element. And this might then be very productive and cause lots of moral change in people. Now, after saying all that guilt is something that we should be causing and shame something that we should be trying avoiding, I'll just briefly mention that shame can sometimes be a productive thing. And this is if two different things happen. First, if the identity that the person in question is trying to find as something acceptable is related to animal issues. So if the person already sees some credibility in animal issues and sees the people who present animal issues as credible and wants to identify with them in some sort of a way, she might, as a result of shame, try and change her whole identity in order to match those whom she respects. I hope you're following this. So she's not going back to the anthropocentric identity, but she's instead going to the advocate or pro-animal identity. And this can only happen if there's internal evaluation. And this again demands, I hope you're following this, I have to explain this really briefly. This demands mature shame, mature psychology. So if the person is psychologically strong enough to, in a state of shame, realize that she wants to internally evaluate whether she should be feeling shame, whether the absolutely horrendous state that she's in is something that she deserves, and if she then wants to find solace from changing her whole identity to match those who criticize her, she might change. But this requires a lot of strength, psychological strength. So if you speak into somebody who respects you as a person, who already has some pro-animal attitudes, and who is strong and balanced psychologically, that state of shame, that prohibition might work. And in those instances, you might try and say to them, to stop doing that. Stop eating meat. You have to stop it now. But otherwise, not. So, and the key thing here is what sorts of groups these people want to belong to. If they're very much still based on the anthropocentric identity and the group of the majority, this won't work. But if they really want to now start and look at their whole values again and reevaluate their identity and try and locate the sense of self in something else, it might work. So shame that involves the capacity for self-evaluation and the willingness to listen to pro-animal cultures can be productive. And this means that the meat eater will take into account the activist views. And this might then lead into a very holistic change, the desire to change their whole lifestyle and their whole outlook on things. Because remember, the state of shame involves the whole identity, the whole self. And this again might be even more productive than just feeling slight guilt over one action. This might change the whole person completely. If they trust you, if they have respect for you, if they already have pro-animal sentiment, and if they're mentally strong enough. But these are rare occasions, and this is the last slide. The situation is usually such that we have to just try and concentrate on the guilt and not cause any shame. So when you speak to somebody you don't know, you should never say, stop doing this and be hostile towards them or be overly critical or overly militant. Instead, you should be quite positive and quite encouraging and quite gentle. And that leads into guilt. But if you know a particular person, you know that they are already probably a little bit changing, then go on full-blown attack if you want to. Because if you know that they're strong enough, and they are already moving in that direction, and they respect those views that you're presenting, they might change overnight. You never know. This does happen. It happened to me. I know that I became vegan because of an intense state of shame overnight, suddenly, because of one conversation. So I was already there, but I needed that one immense state of shame. So it depends on the people. For the general audience, just skills and positive encouragement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa, for that very thought-provoking talk. And anybody has anything especially rather short? That, please, yeah.
You try to separate this, as I understand, the shame and guilt from each other, but isn't it sometimes like we feel the guilt and then you feel the shame at the same time too?
They can sometimes interlink, but usually in those instances, one of them is the kind of like the dominating one. And usually, I mean,
the guilt is probably then dominating.
Yeah. Well, it depends. Sometimes it's the shame can be too. But according to research, this is quite rare. It can happen, but it's quite rare. So usually they're very separated, and one of them is taking place. But again, we are all different people, and we can't say that every single time a person will just go only undergo shame or guilt, and we vary, and our psychological mechanisms vary. So sometimes, of course, we might feel them too, if you do at the same time.
If you do something bad, and the other people see that you did it with shame.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So then
Yeah. But that's mature shame, because you know that you have done something bad, and that's exactly what the mature shame refers to. Perhaps it is a state where you have guilt too. Yeah. Because you know you have done something wrong, and you respect the people in the eyes of whom you have committed that wrong. And that's the guilt then, yeah. So it's a good question, yeah.
Well, thank you so much.